On Thanksgiving Day, my billionaire son visited me and asked, "Did you like the lake house I gave you, Mom?" In shock, I replied, "What house? I never received anything." My gold digger daughter-in-law slowly walked up to him. "I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout-out in our next video." Today's special shout-out goes to Charlotte Johnson from Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. I never thought a simple dinner conversation would change everything I believed about my family. For 3 long years, I had been living in a tiny apartment, working night shifts at a gas station just to pay rent. My old bones ached every morning, but I kept telling myself things would improve someday. My son Marcus had built a huge business empire from scratch. At 40 years old, he owned restaurants, hotels, and shopping centers across the country. People called him a business genius, and I felt proud watching him succeed. But we rarely talked anymore. He was always flying somewhere for meetings or signing big deals. After his dad passed away 4 years back, Marcus buried himself in work completely. I understood his pain because I felt it too. Losing someone you love makes people cope in different ways. My small apartment felt extra quiet that Thanksgiving morning. I had used my last $50 to buy a turkey and all the sides he loved as a boy. My kitchen counter could barely hold all the food, but I wanted our dinner to be perfect. It had been 6 whole months since I had seen my son face to face. When Marcus walked through my door, everything about him screamed money and success. His suit probably cost more than what I made in 3 months working at the gas station. His shoes looked like they belonged in a fancy magazine. Right behind him came Elena, his wife of 4 years. She wore a beautiful white dress that looked like it cost thousands of dollars. Her dark hair was styled perfectly even though it was windy outside. "Mom, everything smells amazing in here," Marcus said while giving me a quick hug before helping Elena take off her coat. She smiled at me with those perfect white teeth, but something in her eyes made me feel uncomfortable, like she was studying me and making notes about everything she saw. We sat down to eat and I listened while Marcus talked about buying more buildings and opening new businesses. Elena would jump into the conversation sometimes, talking about their fancy vacations to other countries and how they were redecorating their mansion. I nodded and tried to look interested, but every story they told reminded me how different our lives had become. I was counting pennies while they were spending thousands without thinking twice. Then something happened that changed everything. Marcus leaned back in his chair after finishing his pie and gave me a big smile. "Mom, there's something I've been wanting to ask you about for a while now." I put down my fork and looked at him carefully, ready to listen to whatever he had to say. "How have you been enjoying that beautiful lake house I bought for you 3 years ago? I remember you always said you wanted to live somewhere peaceful near the water." The words hit me like a bucket of cold water thrown in my face. I stared at him with my mouth hanging open, trying to understand what he just said. A lake house. My heart started beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. "What lake house, sweetheart? I never got any lake house from you." Marcus stopped smiling completely. He looked over at Elena, who had suddenly become very still and quiet next to him. "The house at Crystal Lake, Mom. I had all the papers sent to you for your 70th birthday 3 years ago. You don't remember getting them." I shook my head back and forth, feeling dizzy and confused. "Marcus, honey, I promise you I would remember getting a house. That's not something a person forgets. Are you absolutely sure you sent it to the right person?" Elena suddenly jumped up from her chair, her napkin falling onto the floor. "Oh my goodness, I just remembered," she said, her voice sounding strange and higher than normal. "I have to make an important phone call about tomorrow's doctor appointment. Please excuse me for just 1 minute." She walked quickly toward my bedroom, pulling her phone out of her purse. But something about the way she moved seemed wrong and panicked, like she was running away from something scary. Marcus was frowning now, and I could see his business brain trying to figure out this puzzle. "Mom, that doesn't make any sense at all. I told my secretary Jessica to handle everything personally." She was supposed to mail you the house deed and set up monthly money payments too. Monthly payments. I felt like my legs might give out underneath me. What monthly payments are you talking about? The $2,000 I've been sending you every single month to help pay for things you need. Jessica promised me you were getting everything without any problems. The room started spinning around me. $2,000 every month for 3 years meant $72,000 total. That was enough money to change my whole life completely. Enough to quit my terrible night job, buy medicine when I got sick, fix my broken car, and stop worrying about money for food every single day. I grabbed the table edge to keep myself steady. Marcus, I swear on your father's grave, I haven't gotten any monthly money from you. I've been working at the gas station every night just to afford my tiny apartment. Last month I had to choose between buying groceries or paying my electric bill, and I chose groceries so I wouldn't starve. Marcus went completely pale and stood up so fast his chair fell over backwards. That's impossible, Mom. I have all the bank records and receipts. Everything should be perfectly documented somewhere. From my bedroom, I could hear Elena talking on her phone, but her voice was too quiet for me to understand the words. My hands started shaking as I began to understand how serious this situation really was. "Show me the papers," I whispered, my voice barely loud enough to hear. "Show me everything you have about this house and money." Marcus was already looking through his phone, scrolling through emails with desperate fingers moving quickly. "I have copies of all the documents at my office, Mom. The house deed, all the payment confirmations, everything Jessica handled for me. If you haven't been getting this money, then somebody else has been taking it." We both turned toward my bedroom at the exact same time. Elena's voice had stopped completely. The silence felt heavy and guilty, like when a child stops making noise because they're doing something wrong. I stood up on wobbly legs and walked slowly toward the bedroom doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. Elena was standing with her back toward us, holding her phone against her ear, but she wasn't talking to anyone anymore. When she heard our footsteps getting closer, she spun around quickly with a red face like she had been caught doing something bad. "Is everything okay, Elena?" Marcus asked, but his voice sounded different now. It was the same tone he used when he thought someone at work was lying to him. Elena's smile looked fake and forced this time. "Of course, darling. I was just confirming our dinner reservation for tomorrow night with my sister." But I could see the truth written all over her face now. The guilt in her eyes, the nervous way she kept touching her wedding ring, the way she couldn't look directly at either of us. "Elena," Marcus said very slowly and carefully, "do you know anything at all about the lake house paperwork or the monthly money transfers? You helped Jessica organize several things around that same time period." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever and ever. Elena's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out at all. In that exact moment, looking at her guilty face, I knew somehow that she had stolen everything that was meant for me. This Thanksgiving dinner that I had worked so hard to make perfect was about to become the day when my family fell apart completely. The quiet in my tiny apartment felt like a heavy blanket that was hard to breathe under. Elena stood frozen in my bedroom doorway with her hands squeezed so tight her fingers looked white. Marcus was staring at his wife with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was confusion mixed with growing anger and suspicion. "Elena," I said quietly, keeping my voice as calm as possible even though my heart was racing. "Where is my lake house?" She swallowed hard and her eyes kept jumping back and forth between Marcus and me nervously. There must be some kind of mistake somewhere. Maybe the mail got lost or delivered to the wrong address. Or maybe there was a computer error at the bank that sent the money to the wrong account. But even while she was talking, I could see the lies forming behind her eyes. After working night shifts at the gas station for years, dealing with all kinds of people, I had learned how to tell when someone wasn't telling the truth. Elena was definitely lying, and she wasn't very good at hiding it either. Marcus pulled his phone out again. "I'm calling Jessica right now to get this sorted out immediately. She handled everything personally for me." "No, wait," Elena said quickly, stepping toward us with panic in her voice. Maybe we should talk about this privately first, just the three of us. Your mother has been through so much stress lately, and I don't want to upset her even more if this turns out to be just a simple computer mistake. I felt cold anger building up inside my chest like ice forming. Upset me even more, said Elena. Honey, I've been eating nothing but crackers and soup for dinner most nights while you've been wearing $1,000 dresses and taking fancy vacations. I think we're way past the point of worrying about upsetting me. Marcus was already pressing buttons on his phone. Within just a few seconds, I could hear a woman's voice answering on the other end. Jessica, this is Marcus. I need you to find the paperwork for that lake house I bought for my mother 3 years ago. It's very important. There was a short pause. Then Jessica's voice became louder and clearer as Marcus put the phone on speaker mode for all of us to hear. Of course, Mr. Williams. You mean the property at 892 Crystal Lake Road. I have all the signed documents right here in my files. The house deed was transferred to Dorothy Williams on November 20th, 3 years ago. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might jump out of my chest. That was my name and the right date, but I had never signed any papers or seen any documents about a house. And what about the monthly money transfers? Marcus asked with his voice getting tighter. All processed exactly as you requested, sir. $2,000 transferred on the first day of every month to the bank account you told me to use. The account is registered under Dorothy Williams, account number ending in 7394. I felt all the blood drain out of my face and I got dizzy. I don't have any bank account ending in 7394. My account number ends in 2158. Marcus's eyes snapped over to Elena like a trap closing. Jessica, can you read me that complete account number right now? As Jessica read all the numbers out loud, I watched Elena's face completely fall apart. It wasn't my account number. It wasn't even close to my real account number at all. Jessica, Marcus said, his voice getting dangerously quiet and cold. Who gave you this bank account information to use? Your wife did, sir. Mrs. Williams called me in January 3 years ago and told me there had been a change in your mother's banking information. She gave me the new account and routing numbers and asked me to update everything in the computer system. Marcus's phone almost slipped out of his shaking hand. Elena made a small, scared sound in the back of her throat like a trapped animal. And the house deed, Marcus continued, his voice getting harder. Where was it supposed to be mailed to? The address Mrs. Williams provided for me, sir. Let me check my notes. Yes, here it is. 1247 Oak Street, apartment 5C. I had never lived on Oak Street in my entire life. I had been in this same tiny apartment for 8 years straight. Marcus hung up the phone, and the silence that followed was so quiet you could hear a pin drop on the floor. When he looked at Elena, his face was completely blank, which somehow seemed scarier than if he had been yelling and screaming. Explain this to me right now, he said in a flat voice. Elena's fake composure finally cracked completely. Tears started running down her cheeks, but they looked more like panic tears than sorry tears. Marcus, you have to try to understand my situation. My brother was about to lose his business and his house. He has 3 young children, and they were going to be homeless on the street. I just borrowed the money for a little while. I was planning to pay everything back as soon as I could figure out how. Borrowed? I whispered, my voice shaking with anger. You mean you stole it from me? No, it wasn't like that at all. Elena's voice got higher and more desperate. I was going to pay back every single penny, I promise. I just needed some time to work things out, and the lake house. Well, it's not like you were actually using it for anything. My brother's family needed a place to live while they got back on their feet financially. I felt something break inside my heart like glass shattering. Not like I was using it, said Elena. I've been working all night every night at a gas station to afford this tiny apartment. I've been eating 1 small meal per day to make my grocery money last the whole week. I haven't been able to turn my heater above 60 degrees all winter because I can't afford the electric bill. Marcus was staring at Elena like he had never seen her before in his entire life. Elena, my mother could have died from being so poor. What if she had gotten sick and couldn't afford to go to the doctor or buy medicine? But she didn't get sick, Elena said desperately, like that made everything okay. She's fine and healthy right now. My brother has serious health problems and his children needed help more than she did. He has diabetes and high blood pressure and couldn't afford his medications either. The coldness in her words hit me like being punched in the stomach. She thought her brother's family was more important than me, so it was okay to steal my house and money. I thought about all the nights I had laid awake worrying about how to pay my bills, feeling guilty for not being able to afford better food or warmer clothes. Where is my house right now? I asked, my voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. Elena wiped her runny nose with the back of her hand, smearing her expensive makeup everywhere. My brother and his family are living there with my parents. They've been fixing it up and making improvements to increase the value with. With my money, Marcus said in a voice as cold as ice. Elena nodded miserably like a child who got caught stealing candy. I sank down into my chair feeling suddenly exhausted and old. For 3 whole years, I had told myself that Marcus was just too busy with his successful business to check on his mother very often. I had been proud that he didn't need to worry about me anymore because he had his own important life to live. But this whole time he thought he was taking good care of me. He thought I was comfortable and happy and had everything I needed to live well. Mom, Marcus said, and his voice cracked a little bit. I'm so sorry this happened. I thought you were okay and safe. I thought you had everything you needed and more. I looked at my son, this successful man who had worked so hard to build a better life for himself, and I could see the little boy who used to promise he would take care of his mama when he grew up big and strong. He had tried to keep that childhood promise, but the woman he trusted and loved most in the world had stolen it away from both of us. How much money? I asked Elena directly. How much of my money did your family take and spend? She was quiet for a long time, staring at the floor like a guilty child. All of it, she finally whispered so quietly I could barely hear her. All $72,000. Marcus asked, his voice getting louder. Plus a house that's probably worth at least $400,000 by now? Elena's family had been living like rich people for 3 years using money that was supposed to keep me from being poor and struggling. Marcus stood up slowly, his movements careful and controlled like he was trying not to explode with anger. Elena, pack up all your things right now. I want you out of my house tonight, and I never want to see your lying face again. Marcus, please don't do this, she begged, reaching toward him with desperate hands. We can fix this terrible mistake. I'll find a way to pay your mother back every penny, I swear. He stepped away from her touch like she had a disease. With what money, Elena? You've never worked a single day since we got married 4 years ago. Everything you have, everything your brother's family has been living on, was stolen from my mother who was working night shifts just to survive. I watched my daughter-in-law fall apart completely, and I felt nothing at all. No pity for her tears, no satisfaction from her punishment, just an empty feeling where trust used to live. She had looked me straight in the eyes for 3 years, had eaten dinner at this very table many times, knowing I was struggling and suffering while her family lived in luxury using my stolen money. As Elena's loud sobs filled my small apartment, I realized this Thanksgiving would be remembered forever, but not for the happy family gathering I had hoped and planned for. It would be remembered as the day I learned that sometimes the people who smile the brightest and seem the nicest are actually hiding the darkest and most terrible secrets. After Elena left that night, crying and begging for forgiveness that neither Marcus nor I felt ready to give, my apartment felt completely different. It was quieter, but not in a peaceful way. The silence was heavy with all the lies that had been told and the trust that had been broken into tiny pieces. Marcus wanted to call his lawyer immediately and start legal action, but I asked him to wait just a little bit. Not because I was changing my mind about getting my money and house back, but because I had a strong feeling we needed to know everything Elena had done before we took the next step. People who steal usually don't steal just once, and my gut told me this went much deeper than just a house and some monthly payments. Mom, you don't need to worry about handling any of this, Marcus said as he sat across from me at my small kitchen table. His expensive suit was wrinkled from this long, terrible day. "Let me take care of everything. You've already been hurt enough." But I shook my head firmly. For 3 years, I had been the victim of Elena's lies without even knowing it. I had been helpless and clueless while she systematically stole everything my son had tried to give me. Now that I knew the truth, as painful as it was, I wasn't going to sit back and let other people handle my business for me. "I need to see everything," I told him with determination. "Every document, every bank record, every piece of paper. I need to understand exactly what she did to me and how she did it." The next morning, after Marcus went home to change his clothes and gather all his business documents, I called my gas station manager for the first time in 3 years to tell him I wouldn't be coming to work. Mr. Rodriguez was surprised because I had never missed a single shift, but he was understanding when I explained I had a serious family emergency to deal with. If only he knew how serious it really was. Marcus came back to my apartment carrying boxes of paperwork and his laptop computer. We spread everything out across my small dining room table, the same table where Elena had sat just hours before, playing the perfect role of the caring daughter-in-law while hiding her terrible crimes from both of us. The first document we looked at carefully was the deed to the lake house. My signature was there, clear as day, on legal papers I had never seen before in my life. But as I stared at it closely, something looked wrong to me. "This isn't how I write my name," I said, pointing at the signature with my finger. "Look at the D in Dorothy. I always make it with a little curve at the bottom, but this one is just a straight line." Marcus took a picture with his phone, then found a Christmas card I had signed for him 2 years ago. The differences were small but obvious once you knew what to look for. "She copied your signature," he said, his voice flat with anger and disbelief. We kept digging through the papers like detectives solving a crime. The bank records showed that the monthly payments had been going to an account that was indeed opened in my name, but at a bank I had never done business with in my entire life. Someone had opened that account using my personal information without my knowledge. "I need to see this bank account," I said firmly. Marcus called the bank, but they wouldn't give him any information over the phone since his name wasn't on the account. So we drove there together, my hands shaking nervously as I walked into the fancy marble lobby of First National Bank with my driver's license and social security card as proof of who I was. The account had been opened 3 years and 2 months ago, just a few weeks before the first payment was supposed to come to me. The address they had on file was 1247 Oak Street, apartment 5C, the same fake address Jessica had mentioned yesterday. The phone number listed wasn't mine either. "Ma'am," the bank worker said, looking confused as she scrolled through the computer records. "According to our system, you've never actually visited this branch before today, have you?" "No," I said firmly. "I've never been here before in my whole life." She showed us the signature card from when the account was first opened. It was the same fake version of my name, signed by someone who definitely wasn't me. "This is identity theft," the bank worker said, sounding worried and concerned. "You need to file a police report right away." But we weren't finished discovering the truth yet. Marcus had brought copies of all his financial records related to helping me, and as we sat in the bank's customer waiting area, an even worse picture started to become clear. The monthly payments were just the beginning of Elena's crimes. Marcus had also been sending extra money for my medical expenses that I had never received. $500 when he thought I needed new eyeglasses, $900 for dental work he believed I was getting, $1,200 last Christmas as a special bonus for me. Every single payment had gone straight into the fake account that Elena had set up. "How much total?" I asked, even though I was scared to hear the answer. Marcus's fingers moved quickly across his phone's calculator app. His face turned completely white. $87,000 over 3 years, Mom. She stole $87,000 that was meant for you. I felt so dizzy I thought I might faint right there in the bank. $87,000 was more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. It was enough to have completely changed everything, to have given me security and comfort and peace of mind instead of the constant stress of counting every penny just to survive. We drove to 1247 Oak Street next to see the fake address Elena had used. It was a run-down apartment building in the worst part of town, with broken windows and garbage scattered around the parking lot. Apartment 5C was completely empty with a big "For Rent" sign taped to the door. She probably rented this dump just long enough to create the fake address, Marcus said, his jaw tight with anger. Then she stopped paying rent and disappeared. But I was thinking about something else that bothered me. Marcus, how did Elena get all my personal information? My social security number, my birth date, all the details she would need to open that bank account and steal my identity. He was quiet for a moment, thinking hard. From our house. I keep copies of important family documents in my home office for emergencies. Birth certificates, social security cards, everything. She had access to all of it whenever she wanted. The betrayal felt deeper with every new thing we discovered. Elena hadn't just seen an opportunity and grabbed it impulsively. She had planned this whole thing very carefully, step by step, systematically stealing my identity and my money while living in my son's house, eating his food and pretending to love him. That evening, as we sat in my living room surrounded by evidence of Elena's crimes, Marcus looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I'm so incredibly sorry. I trusted her completely and never thought to double-check that you were actually receiving the money. It never occurred to me that she would lie about something so important." That detail hit me like a punch to the stomach. She was the one who suggested sending me money in the first place? Marcus nodded sadly. About 8 months after Dad died, she started talking about how worried she was about you living alone on such a small income. She said it would be a wonderful thing if I could help with your expenses, especially since my business was doing so well. She even offered to work with Jessica to set up all the payments and paperwork. I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of Elena's manipulation and lies. She had positioned herself as the caring, thoughtful daughter-in-law who was concerned about her husband's struggling mother, while secretly making sure that every single dollar meant for me would end up in her brother's pockets instead. "And the lake house idea came from her too?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Same thing," Marcus said miserably. "She said you had mentioned wanting to live somewhere peaceful near water, that it would be good for your health and happiness. She helped me find the perfect property, negotiated the price with the seller, and handled all the legal paperwork. Elena had played my son like he was a puppet on strings, using his love for me against both of us. She had made him feel generous and caring and responsible while she was systematically robbing me of everything he was trying to give me." As Marcus gathered up all the papers to take to his lawyer the next day, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the walls I had become so familiar with over the past 3 years. This tiny, cramped space with its old furniture and broken air conditioner was never supposed to be my reality for so long. I was supposed to be living comfortably in a beautiful house by the peaceful lake, with enough money in the bank to buy my medicine without worry and food without counting every penny. Instead, Elena's brother and his family were probably sitting by that lake right now, enjoying their stolen comfortable life while I had been working night shifts and eating soup and crackers for dinner. But knowing the truth, as painful and shocking as it was, felt like the first step toward getting my real life back. Elena had stolen much more than money from me. She had stolen 3 years of security, 3 years of dignity, 3 years of the peace of mind that comes with knowing your child is taking proper care of you. Tomorrow we would start the long process of getting everything back that belonged to me. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed knowing exactly where I stood and what had really been happening. And that knowledge, as bitter and painful as it was to swallow, felt like power and strength. The morning Marcus's lawyer called with the results of his private investigation, I was mopping floors at the office building where I had worked night shifts for the past several years. My knees hurt against the cold tile, and my hands were red and sore from the harsh cleaning chemicals. But I kept working because I still needed every dollar from this job, at least until we could get my stolen money back. "Mrs. Williams." Mr. Thompson's voice sounded very serious when I called him back during my lunch break. "We need to meet immediately. What we've discovered goes far beyond what we initially suspected." Marcus picked me up after my shift ended, his face showing the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept well in days. He had been throwing himself into this investigation with the same intense energy he brought to his biggest business deals. But this wasn't just business. This was personal, and it was tearing him apart inside. At the lawyer's office, we sat across from Mr. Thompson as he opened a thick file full of documents and bank records. Elena didn't just steal from you, Mrs. Williams. She's been running what amounts to a criminal fraud operation using your stolen identity. The room felt like it was spinning around me. As he explained everything they had found, Elena had used my personal information to open not just one fake bank account, but 5 separate accounts at different banks around the city. She had applied for credit cards in my name, taken out personal loans, and even filed false tax returns claiming me as a dependent while reporting income that I had never actually earned. The Internal Revenue Service has been trying to contact you about problems with your tax filings, Mr. Thompson continued. They've been sending official notices to the fake address. You're currently under federal investigation for tax evasion and fraud. I felt like I was drowning in deep water. Tax evasion. But I've filed my taxes honestly every single year of my life. We know that now, but the IRS doesn't know that yet. Elena has been reporting to the government that you received all the money Marcus sent to you. Money that you never actually got, of course. From their perspective, it looks like you've been hiding income and not paying taxes on it. Marcus's hands were squeezed into tight fists. How much did she steal in total? Mr. Thompson flipped through several pages of financial records, including the original $87,000, plus additional credit card spending, loan money and fraudulent tax refunds she claimed in your name. We're looking at approximately $134,000. The huge number hit me like being struck by lightning. $134,000. I made $20,000 per year mopping floors and cleaning toilets. Elena had stolen almost 7 years of my entire salary. And what about the lake house? That's where things get more legally complicated, Mr. Thompson said. The property is legally in your name, Mrs. Williams, based on the forged deed. Elena's brother and his family have been living there rent-free, making expensive improvements with your stolen money. I thought about Elena's brother, who I had met only once at their wedding 4 years ago. He had seemed like a nice man with a sweet wife and 3 young children. They had looked a little overwhelmed by Elena's wealthy lifestyle, but grateful for her success and generosity. Had they known where all that money was really coming from? Had they known they were living in a house stolen from their sister-in-law's mother? Can we get the house back? Marcus asked. Yes, absolutely, but we'll need to involve criminal law enforcement. This isn't a simple civil matter anymore. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, and federal tax evasion. Elena could face serious prison time if convicted. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the woman who had sat at my table just a few days ago, crying and begging for forgiveness. She had seemed genuinely sorry and remorseful then. But now I wondered if those tears had been real emotions or just another manipulation and lie. What happens to her brother's family? Yes. Her brother, his wife, the 3 children. They'll have to leave the property immediately, Mr. Thompson said. His expression sympathetic but firm. If they can prove in court that they didn't know the money was stolen, they might avoid criminal charges themselves. But they can't keep living in a house that was bought with fraudulent funds. David was staring out the window, his jaw tight with anger. Where is Elena right now? She's been staying with her brother's family at the lake house, Mr. Thompson said. Our private investigator confirmed she's been there since she left your apartment on Thanksgiving. So she ran straight to the people who had been living off my mother's stolen money, Marcus said bitterly. Of course she did. She probably warned them about everything. That afternoon, we drove out to Crystal Lake to see the house that was legally mine but that I had never seen before. As we pulled into the long, winding driveway, I couldn't help but gasp in surprise and amazement. It was absolutely beautiful beyond my wildest dreams. A large, modern house with huge windows overlooking the sparkling water, surrounded by tall trees and carefully maintained flower gardens. This was what Marcus had lovingly intended for me to enjoy. This peaceful, comfortable place where I could have spent my retirement years watching the sunrise over the lake instead of worrying about whether I could afford groceries. Elena's brother answered the front door, and his face immediately fell when he saw Marcus and me standing there. "Oh," he said quietly, his voice filled with dread. "We've been expecting this visit." Elena appeared behind him in the doorway, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her before. Her expensive designer clothes had been replaced with simple jeans and an old sweater, and her face was puffy and red from days of crying. "Dorothy," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper, "I'm so terribly sorry for everything I've done to you." I looked at this woman who had smiled at me across countless family dinner tables while systematically destroying my financial security and stealing my future, and I felt nothing but cold, hard anger. "Are you really sorry, Elena?" "Yes. Or are you just sorry that you finally got caught?" She started crying again with big, dramatic tears, but I wasn't moved by her performance this time. I had seen her tears before and had believed in them completely. I had even felt sorry for her sometimes when Marcus worked long hours and she seemed lonely and neglected. "I never meant for things to go this far," she sobbed loudly. "It started with just borrowing the first month's payment to help my brother save his business from bankruptcy. I was planning to put the money back before anyone noticed it was missing." "But you didn't," Marcus said, his voice as cold as winter ice. "You kept taking more and more money. You stole my mother's identity, filed false tax returns in her name, opened credit cards she didn't know about. That's not borrowing, Elena. That's organized crime." Elena's sister-in-law had appeared in the doorway behind them, her face streaked with tears of shame and horror. "We had absolutely no idea where the money was really coming from," she said desperately, her voice shaking. "Elena told us that Marcus had insisted on buying us this house as a generous gift. She said he wanted to help our family while we got back on our feet financially." I looked at this woman, probably close to my own age, and I could see genuine shock and complete horror in her eyes. She truly hadn't known the truth. None of them had known except Elena herself. "The federal government thinks I'm a criminal because of what your sister did," I said quietly. "I could go to prison because Elena filed fake tax returns using my name and social security number." Elena's sister-in-law gasped loudly, pressing both hands to her mouth in shock. "Oh my dear God, Elena, what have you done to this poor woman?" But Elena just kept crying and making excuses, offering apologies that meant absolutely nothing now. She had had 3 entire years to confess the truth, 3 years to make things right, and instead she had chosen to dig herself deeper into crime and lies. Mr. Thompson stepped forward with his briefcase full of legal documents and court papers. "Mrs. Stevens, I'm going to need you and your entire family to vacate this property within the next 30 days. Everything that was purchased with the fraudulent funds will need to be returned to Mrs. Williams or paid for in full." As I watched Elena's brother's family absorb the devastating reality of their situation, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Relief. Not satisfaction or revenge. Just pure relief that the truth was finally out in the open for everyone to see. "The police will be here tomorrow morning to arrest Elena," Mr. Thompson continued in his professional voice. "I would strongly recommend that she surrender herself voluntarily to avoid additional charges." Elena looked up at Marcus with desperate, pleading eyes. "Please don't let them put me in jail. I'll pay back every single penny I took, I promise you. I'll get a job and work day and night until it's all returned." Marcus shook his head sadly. "With what skills, Elena? You've never worked a single day in your entire life. You don't even know what real work looks like. All you know how to do is lie and steal and take things that don't belong to you." As we left the beautiful lake house behind us, I turned around for one last look at the place that should have been my peaceful home for the past 3 years. Soon it would finally be mine to enjoy, but it felt hollow and empty now, forever tainted by the knowledge of how Elena had stolen it from me. "Mom," Marcus said as we drove away down the winding road, "I'm going to make absolutely sure you never want for anything ever again. I'm going to take care of you the way I should have been doing all along, the way Dad would have wanted me to." I patted his hand gently while he drove. "You were taking care of me, sweetheart. It's not your fault that Elena stole everything you tried to give me." But as we drove back toward my tiny, cramped apartment, I knew that everything in our lives was about to change completely. Elena would face the serious consequences of her crimes, and I would finally get the security and comfort that Marcus had always intended for me to have. The confrontation was finally over. Now it was time for justice to be served. The divorce papers were finalized on a cold, rainy Monday in March, 4 months after that life-changing Thanksgiving dinner. I sat in the courthouse hallway beside Marcus as his lawyer came out of the courtroom with the news that Elena had signed all the documents without fighting anything. She had already been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for fraud and identity theft, and fighting the divorce would have only added expensive legal fees she couldn't possibly afford. "It's completely finished," Mr. Thompson said, sitting down beside us with relief in his voice. "The marriage is legally dissolved. All assets purchased with stolen funds now revert to their rightful owner. Mrs. Williams, you are now the legal owner of the lake house, and all the money in the fraudulent accounts has been frozen pending full restitution to you." Marcus let out a long, deep breath like he had been holding it for months. "What happens to Elena's brother and his family now?" "They moved out of the property 2 weeks ago," Mr. Thompson explained. "They're staying temporarily with relatives in another state, and they've been surprisingly cooperative throughout this whole process. I think they're genuinely horrified and ashamed by what Elena did to your family." I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness washing over me. Relief that this nightmare was finally ending after so many months of legal battles and paperwork, but sadness for all the innocent people who had been hurt. Elena's brother's family were victims too, in their own way. They had lost their home and their sense of security, all because Elena had chosen to steal instead of simply asking for help when they needed it. The weeks that followed were like a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and major life changes. Marcus threw himself into making things right with the same intense energy he had once used to build his successful business empire. He hired a team of professional accountants to untangle Elena's complicated web of fraudulent tax filings, worked directly with IRS investigators to clear my name completely, and personally supervised every single detail of transferring legal ownership of the lake house back to me where it belonged. But the most important change was in Marcus himself. The successful businessman who had been too busy for regular phone calls suddenly became a son who visited every few days, who called just to check on how I was feeling, who insisted on taking me to all my doctor appointments and helping with grocery shopping. "You don't have to watch over me so carefully, honey," I told him one afternoon as he helped me pack the few personal belongings I wanted to keep from my old apartment. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm stronger than you think." He paused while folding one of my handmade quilts, his hands becoming still on the soft, familiar fabric. "Mom, I missed 3 entire years of your real life because I was stupid enough to trust Elena completely with something so important. I'm not going to miss any more time." I understood his guilt, even though I didn't think he deserved to carry that burden. Elena had been a master of manipulation, using his genuine love for me to hide her terrible crimes. But I also understood that trust, once broken so completely and thoroughly, takes a very long time to rebuild. Even trust in your own judgment. Moving into the lake house felt completely surreal, like stepping into someone else's dream life. The place was absolutely beautiful, but it carried the heavy weight of everything that had happened there. Elena's brother's family had taken excellent care of it during their time there, I had to admit. The flower gardens were perfectly maintained, the house was spotlessly clean and recently updated, and they had even added a lovely screened porch overlooking the water that I immediately fell in love with. But it felt like moving into a stranger's life rather than reclaiming something that had always belonged to me. "We can change anything and everything you want," Marcus said as we walked through the spacious rooms together for the first time. "New furniture, different paint colors, whatever it takes to make this place feel like your real home." I appreciated his thoughtfulness and generosity, but I wasn't sure that new curtains and different wall colors would erase the knowledge that Elena's brother had sat in this very living room for 3 years, drinking his morning coffee and reading his newspaper, while I had been working night shifts and rationing my medication 50 miles away. The financial recovery process was much more complicated than anyone had expected it to be. The various accounts Elena had opened in my name contained not just the money Marcus had originally sent, but also funds from credit cards she had used and personal loans she had taken out using my stolen identity. Untangling what belonged to whom required professional forensic accounting and many months of careful documentation and legal paperwork. The good news, my new financial advisor explained during our first meeting, is that when everything is finally sorted out and recovered, you'll have not just the original money your son sent, but also accumulated interest and some additional compensation for the identity theft crimes. We're looking at approximately $160,000 once the legal process is completely finished. $160,000. I had never even dreamed of having that kind of money in my entire life. It was enough to live comfortably for many years, to never worry about choosing between groceries and medication again, to actually enjoy my retirement instead of working until my old body gave out completely. But the money felt strange and uncomfortable in my hands, forever tainted by the knowledge of how it had been stolen from me and then recovered through the legal system. I found myself almost missing the simplicity of my old life, where I knew exactly where I stood financially, even if that place was barely scraping by from paycheck to paycheck. The hardest part of this whole experience was dealing with how the community reacted to my story. In a small town like ours, Elena's arrest and criminal trial had been front-page news in the local newspaper for weeks. Everyone knew what she had done, and by extension, everyone knew that I had been the victim of an elaborate fraud scheme that had lasted for years. People's reactions to my situation varied wildly and unpredictably. Some neighbors were very sympathetic, offering help with moving and expressing genuine outrage on my behalf. Others seemed almost suspicious of me, as if they couldn't believe I hadn't somehow known what was happening to my own money. A few people made comments that suggested they thought I should feel grateful for all the attention and publicity, as if being defrauded was somehow better than being ignored and forgotten. The worst reactions came from people who acted like I had won the lottery instead of having my identity stolen and my life turned upside down. "Well, at least everything worked out perfectly in the end," one neighbor said cheerfully while I was buying groceries. "Now you're sitting pretty in that beautiful house by the lake." I wanted to shake her and explain that having your daughter-in-law systematically steal your identity and rob you for 3 years isn't something that just works out perfectly. That the money and the house came with a permanent knowledge that someone I had trusted completely had viewed me as nothing more than a convenient source of funds to exploit for her own family's benefit. But I kept my mouth shut and focused all my energy on rebuilding my life from scratch. The first night I spent completely alone in the lake house. I sat on the beautiful screened porch with a cup of herbal tea, watching the sunset paint the water in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The view was absolutely breathtaking, peaceful in a way I had never experienced before in my entire life. But I felt oddly detached from all the beauty, as if I were a temporary guest in someone else's dream rather than the rightful owner of my own home. My phone rang, and Marcus's name appeared on the screen. He had been calling every single night since I had moved into the lake house, checking to make sure I was settling in comfortably and didn't need anything. "How are you feeling tonight, Mom?" he asked with genuine concern in his voice. I looked out at the peaceful lake, trying to find the right words for the complicated mixture of emotions that were churning around inside me. "Grateful," I said finally after thinking for a moment. "And sad and angry and confused, sometimes all at the same time." "That sounds exactly right," Marcus said softly. "You know, I've been thinking about what Elena said that last day when we confronted her, about how she never meant for things to go so far. I remembered her tears and her desperate apologies. What about it? I think she was probably telling the truth about that part. I think she really did start with small intentions and then couldn't find a way to stop herself. But that doesn't make any of it better, does it? If anything, it makes it worse," I agreed. She had dozens of opportunities over 3 years to confess what she had done, to make things right, and she chose to dig herself deeper into lies and crime every single time. He was absolutely right. Elena's initial crime might have been driven by desperation or poor judgment, but everything that followed had been calculated deception and manipulation. She had looked me directly in the eye at family dinners and holiday celebrations, had hugged me and told me she loved me, had listened to me worry about money and bills, all while knowing she was the reason I was struggling and suffering. I keep thinking about how proud she seemed, I said slowly, when she talked about the improvements her brother's family was making to the house. She was genuinely proud of what they had accomplished with my stolen money. She wasn't just stealing from you, Mom. She was stealing from both of us, Marcus said with pain in his voice. She stole the relationship we should have had these past 3 years, the peace of mind I thought I was giving you, the security I thought you had. After I hung up with Marcus, I walked slowly through the house that was finally, legally, undeniably mine. It was beautiful and comfortable, everything I could have possibly wanted or dreamed of. But it would take time, maybe a very long time, before it felt like home instead of evidence of a crime that had been committed against me. I settled into the master bedroom that night, in a bed that was mine, in a house that was mine, with enough money in the bank to last me comfortably for the rest of my life. I should have felt triumphant and victorious. Instead, I just felt exhausted down to my bones. But as I drifted off to sleep to the gentle, soothing sound of water lapping against the shore outside my window, I realized that exhaustion wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was the kind of exhaustion that comes after a long, difficult journey is finally, completely over. Tomorrow, I could begin the real work of making this stolen dream into something that truly belonged to me and reflected who I really was. 1 year later, I stood on the same screened porch where I had spent that first confused and emotional night. But absolutely everything had changed. The space that had once felt foreign and uncomfortable now wrapped around me like a warm, familiar embrace. I had replaced all of Elena's brother's family's furniture with pieces that spoke to my heart and reflected my personality. I had added plants that I had chosen myself from the local nursery, and hung photographs that told the story of my real life rather than someone else's stolen dream. The morning routine I had developed over the months had become sacred and precious to me. Coffee on the porch as the sun came up over the peaceful lake, watching the water change colors with the shifting light. It was a luxury I had never imagined I would have in my lifetime. This peace, this precious time to simply exist without the constant, crushing weight of financial worry pressing down on me. Marcus's car pulled into the circular driveway right on schedule for our weekly breakfast tradition together. This routine had started several months ago, after his initial guilt-driven hovering had naturally settled into something more comfortable and healthy for both of us. We had both learned to navigate this new relationship carefully, one built on complete honesty rather than the false foundation Elena had created with her lies. "Good morning, Mom," he called cheerfully as he came through the front door, carrying a white bakery bag. "I brought those blueberry muffins you mentioned liking last week." I smiled warmly, setting 2 matching plates on the kitchen table. "You don't need to bring me pastries every single week, sweetheart. I'm perfectly capable of feeding myself well now." He grinned, looking more relaxed and happy than I had seen him in years. "I know you are, but I enjoy bringing them. Besides, Mrs. Patterson at the bakery always asks about you specifically." It was true. The same community that had whispered and gossiped about my situation during Elena's highly publicized criminal trial had completely embraced me once justice was finally served. People stopped me at the post office to ask how I was settling into my new life. Neighbors brought homemade casseroles when I first moved to the lake house, and even the mail carrier made sure to mention whenever he had particularly good news to deliver to me. "Any word from the lawyer about Elena's parole hearing?" I asked as we settled into our usual spots at the breakfast table. Marcus shook his head. "Her public defender filed the paperwork for early release, but Mr. Thompson says it's basically just a formality that won't change anything. The evidence against her was too overwhelming, and she pleaded guilty to everything. She'll serve her complete sentence." 2 years had seemed like such a short punishment when the judge first announced it in court. But as the seasons had changed and my new life had taken solid shape, I had stopped thinking about Elena's timeline and started focusing entirely on my own future. "How do you feel about that news?" Marcus asked, studying my face carefully to gauge my reaction. I considered his question seriously, as I always did. A year ago, I might have wanted Elena to suffer much more, to face consequences that matched the enormous scale of what she had stolen from me. But now, sitting in the house that was truly and completely mine, with plenty of money in the bank and my son's genuine, devoted attention, Revenge felt much less important than it once had. I feel like she's exactly where she needs to be, I said thoughtfully. Not because I want her to suffer unnecessarily, but because she needs to face real, serious consequences for what she did to our family. Maybe prison will teach her something important about honesty that our family was never able to teach her. Through the lengthy legal process, I had learned more about Elena's psychology and background than I had ever wanted to know. She had grown up in a family that struggled financially, always comparing themselves bitterly to others who had more money and nicer things. When she married Marcus, she had suddenly gained access to wealth beyond anything she had ever imagined possible. But apparently, even that hadn't been enough to satisfy her. She had needed to feel like she was the provider, the problem solver, the one who could rescue her family from their difficulties. The therapist her lawyer hired said she has something called narcissistic entitlement disorder, Marcus had told me months earlier. She genuinely believed she deserved whatever she could take because she felt life had been unfair to her family. I had thought about that psychological explanation for a very long time. Life had certainly been unfair to me too, especially when I had lost my husband and found myself struggling alone to make ends meet on a tiny income. But I had never once considered that life's unfairness gave me the right to steal from other people or hurt innocent families. "Have you heard anything about how her brother's family is doing?" I asked with genuine curiosity. Marcus nodded. They moved to Colorado to live with her aunt and uncle. Her brother found steady work at a construction company there. They're basically starting their lives over from scratch. I felt a genuine pang of sympathy for them. Elena's crimes had destroyed far more lives than just mine. Her parents had lost their comfortable retirement home and their life savings. Her brother's children had been uprooted from their schools and friends and forced to leave everything familiar behind, all because Elena had chosen theft and deception over honesty and hard work. "I've been thinking about writing them a letter," I said quietly. Marcus's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Really? What would you say to them?" "That I don't blame them for what Elena did, and that I hope they're building a good new life in Colorado." I paused, stirring sugar thoughtfully into my coffee. Elena made her own choices, but her family didn't deserve to pay such a high price for her crimes. We sat together in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the peaceful lake through the large windows. A family of ducks had taken up permanent residence near the shore, and I had gotten into the happy habit of tossing them pieces of bread from my morning toast. These were simple pleasures that I had never had time for when every moment of my life was consumed with basic survival. "I have something important to tell you," Marcus said eventually, his tone shifting to something more serious and careful. I looked at him with curious attention. "I've been seeing someone new. A woman I met at a business conference last month. Her name is Sarah, and she's completely different from Elena in every possible way." I felt a small flutter of protective anxiety, then forced myself to relax and trust his judgment. "Tell me about her," I said with an encouraging smile. "She's a certified public accountant who specializes in helping small businesses manage their finances properly. She knows the complete story about what Elena did to our family, and she's not interested in my money at all. She makes excellent money on her own and is very independent." I smiled genuinely. "A financial professional. That seems very appropriate given our recent experiences." Marcus laughed, and the sound was warm and natural. "I thought you'd appreciate that irony. She's also incredibly honest, sometimes almost brutally so. She told me on our fourth date that she thought I was too trusting with people and needed to work on setting better boundaries in my relationships." "She sounds like a very smart woman," I said approvingly. "When do I get to meet this Sarah?" "Only when and if you want to meet her," Marcus said carefully. "I'm not rushing into anything this time around. I'm learning to trust my own judgment again, and part of that means not seeking approval from everyone else before I really know how I feel myself." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand gently. "I'm very proud of you for taking your time and being careful, but when you're ready and feel confident about her, I would love to meet Sarah." After Marcus left that morning, I took my usual leisurely walk around the entire property. The gardens that Elena's brother's family had planted and maintained were still thriving beautifully under my care, but I had added my own personal touches everywhere. A small vegetable patch where I grew fresh tomatoes and herbs for cooking, a cozy reading nook under the ancient oak tree where I spent afternoons with library books, and several bird feeders that attracted bright red cardinals and beautiful blue jays to my yard. The house was slowly but surely becoming mine in ways that had absolutely nothing to do with legal ownership or court documents. It was filled with my choices, my memories, my quiet daily routines that no one could ever steal or forge or manipulate again. That afternoon, I did something I had been planning and preparing for over several weeks. I called my old supervisor at the gas station, Mr. Rodriguez, to give him my official notice. "This is Dorothy Williams," I said when he answered the phone. "I wanted to let you know officially that I won't be returning to work at the gas station. I'm retiring permanently." There was a surprised pause. "Are you feeling all right, Dorothy? You've been out for quite a while now, and we've been wondering when you'd be back." "I'm feeling better than I have in many, many years," I said, smiling at the complete truth of that statement. "I'm finally able to retire and enjoy my golden years." It felt strange and wonderful to say those words out loud. I had never imagined I would be able to retire at all. Had assumed I would work at various jobs until my body completely gave out. But the money Elena had stolen and that had been recovered through the legal system, combined with the beautiful lake house and Marcus's ongoing love and support, meant I could finally stop cleaning other people's messes and start living entirely for myself. That evening, I sat on my beloved porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the calm lake in brilliant shades of gold and deep pink. My phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Sarah wants to know if you like Mexican food. She's thinking of cooking dinner for you next weekend if you're interested." I typed back quickly. "Tell Sarah I love Mexican food, but she doesn't need to try to impress me. I already like anyone who makes my son smile the way he's been smiling lately." As darkness settled peacefully over the water, I thought about the woman I had been exactly 1 year ago. Tired, struggling, proud but quietly desperate, working night shifts and counting every penny just to survive. That woman would never have believed this peace and security was possible for someone like her. This sense of complete financial safety and emotional contentment seemed like an impossible dream back then. Elena had stolen 3 precious years of my life, but in a strange and unexpected way. Her crimes had also given me something I might never have had otherwise. They had forced Marcus to truly see me as a person who needed more than just financial support sent through a secretary. I needed his presence, his attention, his genuine care and involvement in my daily life. Elena's betrayal had also taught me something important about my own inner strength. I had survived the theft, the investigation, the trial, and the complicated process of reclaiming my identity and rebuilding my life from the ground up. I had learned that I was much tougher and more resilient than I had ever given myself credit for, stronger than I had ever needed to be before this experience. I had also learned something valuable about forgiveness. Not forgiveness for Elena, who would have to earn that through genuine change and growth that I might never witness personally, but forgiveness for myself. Forgiveness for being trusting enough to believe in her lies, and forgiveness for Marcus, who had been manipulated and deceived just as thoroughly as I had been. As I locked up my house and headed to bed in my comfortable bedroom, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a day well lived in a life that had been reclaimed and rebuilt. Tomorrow would bring new small pleasures, new quiet joys, new moments of peace that no one could ever steal from me again. The lake house that had started as the scene of Elena's crimes had become my personal sanctuary. The money that had been stolen and then recovered had become my foundation of security. The son who had been deceived into accidentally neglecting me had become my devoted companion and friend. Elena had tried desperately to steal my future and my happiness. But in the end, she had only delayed it temporarily. Now my future was mine, fully and completely, to live exactly as I chose. And I chose peace, contentment, and the simple joy of watching the sunrise over my lake every morning. Now I'm very curious about all of you who have listened to my story from beginning to end. What would you do if you found yourself in my situation? Have you ever experienced something similar with family members or people you trusted? Please comment below and let me know your thoughts. And while you're here, I'm sharing 2 other stories on the screen that are absolute favorites on my channel, and I guarantee they will surprise you in the best possible way. Thank you so very much for watching and listening all the way to the end. This is Granny's voice, and I'll see you in the next story.